2017, when Jordan Peele released his film Get Out, nothing like it had really been done before. The film centers on Chris, played by Daniel Kaluuya, as a photographer who goes to meet his white girlfriend's family. Soon enough, though, they reveal themselves as extremely weird to the point of fetishization.
Is it better?
Wow.
Given the previous absence of black voices within horror, it was only a matter of time where a story like this would finally be told. The racism that is exhibited by Rose's family is not one of slurs. It's not one of overt hatred. In fact, they kind of seem nice-ish to him, if not for what the words they were saying. The characters do not act as overt hillbillies, often stereotyped in other otherization films of horror. They instead have the supreme weirdness of something like the Stepford Wives, even with the main character being a photographer. But we also see this very eerie kind of sense of psychological horror, where nothing even scary happens in the first part that's overt. It is all in the subtext, all in the context of what they're saying, how their body language moves, and how they are treating him like an other. For one, Chris is in the minority. He is basically surrounded by only white people, which already gives him a leg down in terms of being an other. But the other thing that's really scary about this film is how Peele is able to use this otherization with people who should relate to him and his struggle, seemingly not getting it at all and being completely disconnected from the world. They don't understand slang, white or black really, and they just act weird. There's a strangeness, there's an intuition knowing that something's off, that something's wrong. And of course, Chris is correct to assume this. In an earlier scene of foreshadowing, we can see Rose's dad explain that his father basically was in the Olympics, and not one of the normal ones. The 1936 infamous Berlin Olympics. Running in track and field, he obviously lost to the gold medalist who would end up winning. His name is, of course, Jesse Owens, who is a black man. And this is where the movie takes a very interesting and unique turn in the option and story of cultural appropriation and how it impacts people to this day. Because at the end of the day, this family is not weird to him and racist to him because they hate him. They are weird and racist to him because of the fetishization. And it is revealed in the film that the reason that they act like this is to steal his actual body. It is an insidious part of life known as cultural appropriation and stealing. Adolf Hitler, besides being arguably one of the most evil people of all time and a monster, was also a hypocrite. Hot take. People tend to forget this due to his obsession with Aryans or his idea of how Germans used to be, but the Nazi Party had a weird fetishization period. On one hand, they put above all German-sounding values and attributes. On the other hand, they had a deep fetishization of old emperors of the past, including, and not limited to, Greek and Roman ones, despite these obviously not being Germanic, at least not in the way that he would have liked it. So we see this two-sided struggle between what he wanted and what was reality. Some Nazis even stole many things from India. Original fascists were into yoga, for example. despite there not being Aryans. But the word Aryan actually is an Indian Sanskrit word, which means that they really fetishize these cultures that they claim to hate. They later got around this by trying to say that Germans, like that these cultures were somehow German before, and then the original people got kicked out or something. They were crazy people, but it is very interesting because we can see the parallels with Get Out. We see this fetishization among the different, assuming and putting people in boxes, putting different races in different boxes, and then fetishizing their abilities while also claiming it for their own, appropriating it. What does this have to do with horror? Well, as discussed previously, folklore has a direct parallel to horror. They both kind of want to achieve similar things. A lot of folklore, especially the original ones, are very, very scary and usually teach a lesson to enact social change. The same thing can be said with Greek mythology and Roman mythology. Pretty much reading any Roman mythology, it's pretty clear early on that the Romans did the original cultural appropriation. They literally just copied the family tree and the different relations that the gods had with each other. Yes, these gods did exist before, but then they just basically gave them the Greek gods, family tree, and personality, and then called it a day. It was actually quite embarrassing how badly they ripped them off. But speaking of cultural appropriation, we now get to the fetishization aspect of Jesse Owens. Now, Jesse Owens was a Black American man in Berlin for the Olympics, and they accept that he won, but they make sure to announce over and over how this Black man won and how his Blackness must have been a cause in him winning. They put him in a box. They don't allow him to just be the best. They make sure to announce that his Blackness somehow made him the best. Similar to the family of Get Out, which they think that, oh, my grandfather didn't lose because he just wasn't as good. He lost because his body genetically was not as good. Repeating eugenics talking points. Even if it sounds like a compliment, it is still a dehumanization tactic. Film shown here, Olympia, is a documentary directed by a Nazi filmmaker. As basically the premise goes, they're just trying to make a documentary, but there is a heavy Nazi bias and lean that you can see throughout the movie. It is not as overt as one may think, but there are very much different fetishization of races coming into play. Basically, categorizing people and making a fascist element to this entire film, even though it seems mostly normal. So, how does horror steal in a bad way? It's very important for me to mention that not all concurring thoughts are direct cultural appropriation. Sometimes a coincidence is simply just a coincidence. There are many reasons for this. For example, there are many myths that feature women as moon goddesses. This is, for the most part, a heavy coincidence. Of course, Luna from Roman mythology is a direct ripoff of Selene from Greek mythology. However, most of the time, there's no correlation. It's very easily explained, at least by my tour guide in Mexico, that a lot of times moons are portrayed as feminine or goddesses because it correlates directly with the menstrual cycle of a woman. The moon cycle is almost the same exact length. Most women have menstrual cycles, thus, usually, that's why we see moon goddesses. It is completely a coincidence and is just based off of the observations around people. There are exceptions to this. For example, in Norse mythology, he is a man, and in Japanese mythology, he is also a man, with the goddesses being the sun. This is extremely rare. Usually, if there is a sun god, he will be a man. This is just usually how it goes, and it also can enforce gender stereotypes. like the man having to be the bigger one, and the woman being small and more soft in its appearance. For example, Dawns, the goddesses, are also usually women. In Greek mythology, she's Eos, and in Roman mythology, she is Aurora. So if some things are just coincidences, when do we finally find out that something is not? When does a coincidence become a blatant ripoff without credit? Once again, everyone in the world is inspired by each other, so this is not a bad thing to share culture, experiences, and more. However, credit must be given and fetishization must be limited. This is something that very commonly happens. For example, the Romans, the reason that they even took Greek mythology as their own was because Greece was the big bad emperor that they wanted to be like. They looked up to them. This was a form of nostalgia for them, just like Hitler had a nostalgia for the olden times of Italy. That's how fascism even was created, with Mussolini wanting to go back to the Roman times instead of the modern Italy, even though the country had fundamentally changed, and that cannot be stopped. Sincerely apologize to Anna or whoever is grading this, whether it be Dr. Bones or whoever. I am so sorry if you are grading this at night. I cannot apologize more. Anyways, if you had internet access as a young child in the 2000s, you will know who this is. This is Jeff the Killer, and his origins of the image are pretty much unknown. However, we have some really good leads of where this image, the original, may have been from. As we can see here, it is obviously edited, because people don't look like this. Nowadays, this character has kind of fallen into obscurity in a way, because the original story was very, very childish and not scary if you look back on it. It is very obviously, we do not have a Stephen King on our hands, let's just say this. But the guy who wrote the original story, his name was Seswar, and he did an interview with a Lost Media / horror fanatic, Scare Theater. And this is what he had to say about the creation of this image. Seswar claimed to have taken the photo himself using a white latex mask. So, mystery solved, right? Well, actually not at all. Ignoring the fact that this is clearly not taken of a white latex mask, Seswar's story would soon be debunked when they found an earlier video that featured this image before he said that it existed. So Seswar was caught lying.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
Soon, a Japanese video by the name of NNN Special Broadcast would be discovered. Video dated from a year before Seswar's story of making the mask, which means that he was lying. But not only that, it revealed that the origin of this image was most likely of Japanese origins, because we can see the beginnings of this Jeff the Killer image. And they would search far and wide across the internet, and this was not the first time this image had even appeared. It had been circulating Japan for a while. Originally, the image White Powder 2 was discovered, and this was revealed to be one of the, not just the earliest Jeff the Killer image they were able to find, with most of the editing not even done yet. And as suspected, it was of Japanese origin, even though the unedited photo has yet to be found. However, there is some cultural context of the possibility of who could be the original image. The original confirmation and image has yet to be found. Many believe that it is an edited photo of this girl named Mariko. She is of Japanese origin, and her abusive boyfriend basically posted her weight loss images online with the intention of bullying her. This is the possible origin of the images, because back in the day, on Japan forum sites around 2005, when the image is believed to have originated, they were commonly editing photos for good and bad reasons to be more and more distorted until they completely lose their original image. Mariko's ex-boyfriend's photo also looks like the closet from the Jeff the Killer image. So why is this important? Well, this is a textbook case of cultural appropriation. It's not just that the man Seswar was inspired by the image. He literally took it and claimed it as his own. And his tag-along story, which was pretty bad, is not the thing that survives, but the image itself. Which is really interesting because it ties into how cultural context changes how we view things. The context of Romans and Greeks will always be a little different. The context of Godzilla is completely lost in the mainly appropriated American versions because it's no longer an atomic bomb metaphor when it comes from us. Interestingly enough, La Llorona was also culturally appropriated by Spain. Llorona is essentially the serpent goddess in the Aztec religion. However, the context changed when Spain colonized them, but also kept that part of their culture and made it as their own. This actually happened a lot with a lot of colonized nations, including Greece. Once they became Christian, they still held their original pagan stuff too, even if they didn't believe it in anymore, which is kind of how La Llorona is, even though a lot of abuelas, as many people will say, do believe in La Llorona, but she used to be a goddess back before they became Catholic. In conclusion, culture and horror are intertwined, and one of the two can be stolen. Both of them impact each other in a huge way, as given way to lessons or just regular frights. These things are connected and cannot be unconnected from their original context, and even when they are stolen, they are given a new context. When the older people would see the original Jeff the Killer image, they'd think Pretty Face, the original name for the Jeff the Killer image, mostly the unedited one. This one would basically be a retelling of the Slipmouth Woman from Japanese origin, but we think of Jeff the Killer and internet hoaxes, which makes a different context and cultural background no matter who is making the same image being posted. Everything will have a different context, whether that is stolen or colonized. And this is really interesting to see how all the cultures are connected within their differences, and how everything has a different thing that frightens them and connects them together. Thank you.